Hi everyone, Heather here with PersephoneReturns.com, and I am back with another weekly forecast. And this one is for Monday, June 4th, all the way through Sunday, June 10th of 2018. And so this week we have some interesting astrology going on. It's not anything super intense like we experienced a couple weeks ago. It's not anything super chill like we experienced last week. But what it is a little bit confusing. What we have going on here is Mercury is actually going to be in a conjunction with the Sun on Tuesday. And when Mercury comes into a conjunction with the Sun, it's technically called combust, except for when it comes to that exact conjunction. And that's when Mercury is said to be elevated, like at the seat of the Sun. But for the most part, throughout the day on Tuesday, I would say Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, Mercury is going to be in that conjunction with the Sun. And so this normally would sort of strengthen the energy of Mercury in a negative sense, right? So it strengthens the energy of overthinking things, over ruminating on things. Your mind is constantly going crazy. It causes you to again, like overthink and over ruminate on things, but it causes people to be more prone to nervous tension, anxiety. It's very difficult to turn your brain off under this influence. And if you have this in your birth chart, you know this from experience. People who have the Mercury Sun conjunction natally, they're the most prone to anxiety and nervous tension of, all the charts I see. And so this plays out in the sky right now, right? And so this also causes disruptions to communication because we're overthinking everything. We're second guessing ourselves. Communication becomes a little bit more difficult. There can be more misunderstandings and a proneness toward saying the wrong thing or not hearing what people are saying very accurately. And so there can be a tendency toward miscommunication, especially because Mercury is actually going to be at its farthest point from the Earth as it conjuncts the Sun. So Mercury is not very strong in the sky. And so communication issues are very likely at the beginning of this week. And especially on top of that, because this Mercury-Sun conjunction is coming into a square with Neptune and Pisces. Neptune tends to dissolve everything it touches. It makes things very foggy, confusing, intangible, otherworldly, and it can make it very difficult for Mercury. Mercury-Neptune squares are some of the most difficult aspects because it makes it so you can't think very clearly. Your brain is foggy. People will be much more prone to brain fog throughout this week. And even when you think that you know the answer, you probably don't because you're not seeing things clearly. People are going to be more prone to thinking in terms of ideals rather than in terms of what's grounded, logical, rational, and real, even under the strong influence of Mercury and Gemini, right? Because Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So Mercury is technically at home in Gemini. It's quite strong there. Mercury in Gemini amplifies the energy of Gemini, where our thoughts are kind of more all over the place. It's difficult to stick to one topic, but our brains are very strong, inquisitive. We're very able to think on our feet. It increases social intelligence and social awareness, so we can connect and communicate with groups of people and with our friends, our family, whoever it is that we're conversing with, much more easily, normally under this influence. When we have Mercury square Neptune, that very much easily translates toward people exaggerating, people seeing and believing what they want to believe as opposed to what's really in front of their face. People are going to be thinking in terms of, love, compassion, and all of that, but they're also kind of wearing the rose-colored glasses. I don't like to use that phrase when we're talking about Mercury because it's more about your thoughts and your communication, but we're believing and thinking about things in the way that we want to think about them. We're thinking about things through that lens or that filter of love and compassion, and so we can sort of skate over the details. This also makes us more prone to delusion and to lying to ourselves about certain things, and it could also make us more prone to deception from outside sources. So this is a time when if an offer seems too good to be true, it probably is. And so, that's kind of the main energy that's going to be happening this week. It's going to make it very difficult for people who are trying to make big decisions. If you do have a big decision to make and you're having difficulties finding clarity, if you feel like your feet are not on solid ground, I do recommend waiting until the end of the week when this energy starts to pass. And Yeah, that's kind of what's going on. That's going to be the main thing. So there's going to be a lot of confusion in general. This is a very foggy, confusing, and difficult energy. And a lot of times when we have these transits to Neptune, in general, that Mercury Sun conjunction is a very anxious energy. These transits with Neptune, these squares, especially hard aspects from Neptune, they bring an energy where it feels like ominous, like something's about to happen, but then nothing actually does. And so people are going to be a little bit more nervous and a little bit more on edge. And it's going to be very difficult to understand where that's coming from. And if that's the case for you, just make sure that you're doing something that's keeping you grounded, because this is a very ungrounding type of energy. What this is good for is creative forms of communication, creative self-expression through language. That is something that is actually very favored under this influence. And so this can challenge you to, create something in terms of writing, communication, your thoughts, your ideas, painting a picture with words, that type of thing. And that's also why, people can be more prone to deception, because people are going to be exaggerating and painting, these really colorful stories. And other people are going to be more prone to believe it because we're not quite as discerning under this influence, if that, makes sense. But it is really good for painting those pictures and creating those stories and using very colorful, creative language that really, really paints a picture, and you can really see what the person is trying to convey through their words. And so if you are a writer, this is a great influence for that, right? And so, there's good and bad to every transit. This one, Neptune transits to me are some of the most difficult transits, just because we live in this very physical, tangible, like cut and dry, sort of reality. And Neptune is the most non-physical, non-linear, sort of ethereal energy. And so it can be very difficult to contend with, especially for people who are very grounded, because it's very ungrounding. And it usually doesn't make sense in a logical, linear fashion. And so with Mercury being so logical and linear, it's kind of a complex little configuration going on. But that's sort of the main energy this week. There's not anything super crazy going on. Like into the weekend, it's going to be pretty chill, pretty calm. The moon will it'll be in Aries, which will increase our ability to sort of take action more decisively toward the end of the week. And as the moon moves into its exaltation in Taurus on Saturday and Sunday, that's going to be a time when we put our feet back on solid ground, right? When we get clear, we get real, we get practical again. And so that's going to help to ground out the energy that was so confusing and foggy and strange at the beginning of the week. And so I'm going to go through, per usual, and give the forecast for all 12 signs, beginning with Aries. And so when you listen to these forecasts, I do recommend that you always listen to your rising sign first, because that will be most accurate. And then your sun sign as a secondary interpretation, that will be accurate as well, but it's going to give you sort of a different sort of perspective on the energy. And some people like to listen to their moon sign. That's okay too. That's going to be a more internalized interpretation though. So if there's something that I say is happening externally, it's going to be going on more on the inside for the moon sign. And the reason that we listen for the rising sign first is because when people do these sun sign horoscopes and predictions and things like that, what we're doing is we're using a solar chart, which means that we're putting the sun on the ascendant. So we're reading it as if the sun sign were the rising sign. And there is a lot of validity and accuracy to that, but it's going to be even more accurate if you listen for your rising sign. So anyway, that's why we do what we do. And that's why I always tell you guys to listen to your rising sign. So let's start with Aries and Aries rising. So for you guys, the Sun-Mercury conjunction, the combust Mercury, is going to be happening in the third house. The third house is the house of communication. And so for you in particular, Aries, this is going to be, you're going to be much more prone to miscommunication, to confusion, to making mistakes and errors in your day-to-day communication, text messages, emails, phone calls. And so pay attention to the details. This is like acting as if you are in a Mercury retrograde, where you have to read and reread and edit and go back, like triple check your emails at the beginning of this week, because you might make a mistake or a slip up that you have to sort of go back and deal with later on this week. And it might sort of cause a lot of confusion for you or for the person that's on the receiving end. So just be very aware of the language that you're using. Be careful not to exaggerate with numbers and figures, because that's something that's very common with this Mercury square to Neptune. I have that actually in my birth chart, and I have the tendency myself to, I don't like lie about things. I don't mean to exaggerate about things, but when I'm talking about a number, I always inflate the number without even thinking about it. I'll say there were 20 birds and there was one, right? So be careful with that, right? So little exaggerations and things like that can come up for you, and you might not even realize what's happening, and that might throw you off or throw somebody else off, and you might unintentionally mislead somebody through your language. And so just be very aware of the language that you're using, the facts, the figures, and double and triple check everything. But this is also really good for you to sort of visualize things, to make lists, to dream about the future. You're going to feel very daydreamy at the beginning of this week, but that'll clear up as we get to the end of the week. You'll feel a lot more grounded. You'll be focused more on what's practical, what's logical, what's tangible. And so that's Aries and Aries rising. For Taurus and for Taurus rising, this conjunction is happening in your second house of finance. And so there could be some sort of confusion surrounding money or your budget or some sort of bank statement or something along those lines. Whatever it is, there is some sort of difficulty in understanding what's going on when it comes to your finances at the beginning of this week. If there is confusion, or if you do have to make a major decision in that area, I do recommend waiting until the end of the week when the moon is in your sign, exalted, and this Neptune square to the Sun and Mercury is not going to be quite as prevalent and prominent, because at the beginning of this week, it's going to be very difficult to understand what's going on there when it comes to your finances. There can be confusion that comes from your friends too, involving your finances. And so there could be some sort of situation where maybe you're being deceived by a group of people or by your friends. And so just kind of be careful, be aware of that, and be wary of jumping into something with groups of people involving finances, especially if it seems too good to be true. Maybe hold off a couple days before jumping into that decision. All right, and for Gemini and Gemini rising, this is happening in your sign. So the miscommunication is coming from you or directed at you. And so you might be one of the signs that might feel a little bit more anxious, and that anxiety might be stemming from some sort of project or deadline or some sort of issue with an authority figure, or confusion that has to do with your career, your public reputation, your work, what it is that you're doing out in the world. And so if you're feeling kind of anxious and ungrounded at the beginning of this week, if your mind is going haywire, if your thoughts are just sort of flashing by and you're having trouble getting a handle on things, it's really good to do things like spend time in nature, get grounded, put your feet on the ground, take time away. Even though it can seem very difficult to shut your brain off, making lists, journaling, writing down what's going on in your head instead of letting it overpower you. Those are all things that you can do. Also, Bach flower remedies, clematis is really good for grounding, especially under the influence of this Neptunian energy. And so if you are feeling that at the beginning of this week, if you hold tight and sit tight, at the end of this week, you're going to have a much more grounded, much more easy energy that'll come in for you. So it won't be quite so hectic, quite so chaotic. And so you might be feeling a little on edge, a little anxious, a little frustrated, a little confused, again, especially when it comes to things related to your career, but that will pass quite quickly. This is not a long-term transit. This is just for a couple of days. So just keep that in mind and don't rush into anything too crazy if you can help it. And just give yourself a couple days, right? Give yourself a couple days to sort of sit on it. All right, and for Cancer and for Cancer rising, this is happening in your 12th house, the house of hidden enemies, right? The house of things that are secretive, that are kept below the surface, the house of the subconscious. And so you might have somebody that's like slandering you, working against you, talking behind your back or something like that at the beginning of this week, and there might be a lot of confusion surrounding that. This could also be subconscious or unconscious impulses that are trying to come to the surface and trying to be communicated. And so there might be an underlying sense of anxiety or this sort of ominous energy that I spoke about sort of at the beginning of this video, where it feels like something is about to happen and then it just oops, and then it just kind of doesn't, right? And so, if this is the case for you, again, just sit tight. There is a lot of energy surrounding travel, foreign countries, wanting to get away, wanting to spend time outside of the day-to-day grind, the day-to-day reality. And if that's something that you need in order to feel more settled, to feel more grounded, to sort of take that energy and channel it into something better, then absolutely that's something that you can do this week. And so taking time away, maybe planning travel, but not really booking it until later this week. And just spending time in solitude and contemplation, that's going to be a really good way to utilize this energy. A lot of really good ideas and insights can come through doing that as well. Paying attention to your dreams, paying attention to sort of psychic impressions through meditation or just in day-to-day life, synchronicities can come up. It might be confusing as to what the meaning is at first, but if you sit on it, if you wait, it'll become readily apparent. All right. And then for Leo and for Leo rising, this is happening in your 11th house, which is your friends, your social networks. And so the confusion, miscommunication, difficulty, anxiety is stemming from your social networks, the people that you spend your time with, right? The people that you surround yourself with by choice. And so there could be miscommunications, there could be arguments, disputes that come through your friendships, your social networks, charity groups, organizations that you're a part of. And some of these, disputes could have to do with your finances, power struggles, confusion about joint finances and resources, things of that nature could come up as well. So, just kind of be aware of that. You're not going to be able to understand the full picture at the beginning of this week if these sorts of disputes, difficulties, confusions, and miscommunications do come up. So, again, this is another energy where I would suggest sort of waiting it out, writing down your ideas, your thoughts, your impressions, but don't necessarily take action on them because you might not be seeing things quite so clearly just yet. And, you might be seeing these circumstances, these friendships, these, communications through that lens of rose-colored glasses. And so, you might be more prone to deception through groups. And so just kind of be aware of that this week. All right, for Virgo and for Virgo rising, this energy is most prominent in your 10th house of career. And so you might have some confusion, miscommunication, difficulty involving your career, involving your public reputation. There could be some lies being spread about you or something like that. Hopefully not. That's definitely not the case for everyone, but with Neptune involved, it could be. And it could have to do with the workplace. It could have to do with your bosses. There could also be difficulties and power struggles involving your bosses, people in position of authority, right? Anyone who has authority over you. And so just be very careful at the beginning of this week. Be careful of what you say. Make sure that you're saying what you mean and that you're double checking everything, especially when it comes to your work. And also there could be disputes and confusion in your one-on-one interpersonal relationships, especially marriage partnerships, romantic partnerships, close relationships, and business partnerships. And so just make sure that you're double, triple checking everything. And if you do need to make a major sort of business decision within a partnership this week, if you can sort of hold off, or if you can take more time to do that, I think that would be actually beneficial, just because you're not seeing things quite so clearly in that area at the beginning of this week. For Libra and for Libra rising, this is all happening in your 9th house, and the 9th house is the house of your beliefs. It's the house of education, like higher education, and things that you learn through experience. It's the wisdom that you gain through the experiences that you have in your life, right? In your overall life. But it has to do with your perspective on life. It has to do with your beliefs and philosophies that frame your existence here, on earth. And so your higher mind right now is a little offline. Your perspective might be a little off kilter, and you might not be able to see things from that higher, broader perspective as clearly as you normally can. And so you might have a big vision for something that you can't quite put your finger on, or you can't articulate it very clearly. It's very difficult to take these big overarching goals and to translate them into very logical, organized plans for action right now. And so if you do have something on your mind, especially if it involves your work, your health, your daily routines, or some sort of higher educational pursuit, travel, especially travel to foreign countries or long distance, anything of that nature, you're not seeing things from the fullness of the perspective that you could. And so you might be more apt to make sort of hasty decisions or weird decisions at the beginning of this week involving those sorts of themes. So again, this is another transit for everyone really, where if you are having difficulty making a decision, if you are feeling a little foggy and confused, just take a little bit of time, wait it out, just give it a couple days, and things will become much more clear. For Scorpio, Scorpio rising. So this is happening in your 8th house, and the 8th house is the house of debt, joint finances, other people's money, and there can be some sort of confusion or miscommunication involving finances at the start of this week. And so, and there could be some anxiety involving finances, joint finances, debt, taxes, inheritance, investments, those types of things. And so if this is the case for you, don't take action and don't just jump in and do something right away. If you can hold off and if you can wait, you're probably not seeing the full picture, and you're going to be able to be more discerning about it as we move into, later on in the week. This also could be involving like a romantic partnership or something like that. So joint finances and marriage, I would say in particular, there can be some confusion about, but just, sit tight, hold tight. The end result of this will be empowerment if you're able to think creatively and be very discerning, and to make sure that you're not acting out of fear, and you're not only seeing what you want to see, right? You want to see the whole picture. You want to see things in that logical, rational way in order to make the best decisions about whatever situations come up for you. And there could be some sort of deception, disillusionment involving romance and romantic partnerships if you're in that sort of relationship that could come about this week as well. And again, that's one of those things where you're probably still not seeing the clear picture at first. And so, give it a couple days. All right, for Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising, the confusion is coming through your relationships, and this is all your close personal one-on-one relationships, where you're going to be more prone to miscommunication. You're going to be more prone and more susceptible to being on the receiving end of deception. You might be deceiving other people without even realizing it, especially when it comes to your relationships with your family members. And so just be very careful and very clear in your communication, in your language, and double and triple check everything when it comes to communication, especially when it comes to your communication with your family members and the people that you're closest to, and especially your spouse, your significant other, if that is something that is a part of your life. Be very careful and very discerning about what you say, because you might unintentionally mislead somebody, and it would be somebody most likely that you care about very deeply, and you could very easily be misled. But the misleading information, again, is not necessarily intentional. It's because of this lack of precision in speech that's going on right now, and this lack of precision in our thought processes that is happening right now with this transit. And so again, give it a couple days. If something comes up where it's confusing, where you feel anxious about something involving your relationship, involving your home, your family, your property, you're probably not seeing the full picture. So just, give it some time and it'll come to you. All right, for Capricorn and Capricorn rising, this is happening in your 6th house of work, health routines, your day-to-day sort of routines and experience. And so there's going to be some sort of confusion. You might feel very frazzled in your day-to-day life, like you have a lot of chaos going on at the beginning of the week with your work, or some sort of confusion or difficulty involving your health or something along those lines that could potentially come up. But there's a miscommunication that is potentially there with your coworkers or in your workspace. And so just, again, be very careful. Double, triple check those work-related emails. Make sure that you mean what you say and you say what you mean. And, take everything that everybody else is telling you with a grain of salt, especially if it seems a little fishy. All right. And for Aquarius and Aquarius rising, this is going to be happening in your 5th house of romance. This is also the house that rules children, play, hobbies, interests, the things that you love to do because you're passionate about it and you connect with it from the heart. And so there's a little bit of confusion in that area. There might be confusion around a situation with your children or the father of your children if you are a female. There could be confusion about something that you want to, something that you love, something that you want to do. There could be confusion or deception that comes through a romantic partnership. And so, just be very careful. If you meet somebody, they might not be necessarily who you think they are if you meet them at the beginning of this week. And I mean that in the romantic sense. But this is a really good week for you for creative self-expression. And so creative self-expression through communication specifically, and, doing things that you really love to do. In terms of creating, through language and through writing and those types of things. There could also be some difficulty or some confusion involving your finances that comes up this week as well. So, if that's the case, it'll be at the start of this week. Again, this is another situation where if you wait it out, give it a couple days, you'll have a clearer picture. For Pisces and Pisces rising, this is going to be happening in your 4th house of the home and family and property. And so there could be a confusing situation going on or miscommunication that occurs involving your family or that comes through the family. There could also be some sort of difficulty or miscommunication involving your home, your property, maybe, through your landlord or something along those lines where you're not quite clear on what is expected of you, or maybe you don't understand what you're being asked, or maybe you communicate something and the person on the receiving end is not likely to understand what you're talking about. And so this is a difficult time when it comes to communication with family members, communication involving property, land, that type of thing. And so if there's any decisions that you need to make involving your home, your family, your property, I would recommend, just giving it a couple days. You might be able to get a more holistic insight into it where you can see things beyond just the logical and linear. But at the same time, you're not going to be able to see the whole picture. You're not going to be able to think things through very clearly. And if there are miscommunications that come up with family members, again, give it a couple days and then hash it out, because by the end of this week, you'll be able to understand each other a lot better. And any miscommunications or any lies, deceit, anything like that comes up, it'll be a lot more easily cleared up toward the weekend. All right, so that is my forecast for all 12 signs. Thank you again for watching this video, for subscribing to my channel. And if you do want to book a reading with me, you can always do so. The link to do that is in the description of the video below. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.